mission of our Air Force is to defend the United States through the control and exploitation of air and space. To fulfill that mission, the Air Force relies upon the capability of forces that operate in both these mediums. The attributes of these forces allow us to operate freely within a third dimension, anywhere above the Earth's surface and on into space. As airmen, we realize that ours is a somewhat unique service, employing air and space forces to control and exploit this third dimension. This video is the first in a series about air and space power. The series explores our institutional beliefs about air and space power, what we commonly call our doctrine. For you airmen already knowledgeable about our doctrine, the series will serve to refresh and stimulate your knowledge. For those of you seeking to know more about our doctrine, the series will provide a foundation to build upon as you expand your doctrinal knowledge. Although the series is from an Air Force perspective and directed to an Air Force audience, it does not ignore the essential role that air and space forces play in the larger joint effort. Joint Force commanders synchronize the action of air, land, sea, and space forces to achieve strategic and operational objectives through integrated joint campaigns. The emphasis in this series on air and space power is certainly not intended to send a parochial message, but to improve our understanding of our service so that we as airmen are more capable of employing our forces in joint campaigns. With that introduction, you might be thinking, but I don't employ air and space forces. I'm only a maintainer, a personnel specialist, a carpenter, or whatever, fill in the blank. Think again. Everyone in the Air Force contributes to air and space power as a member of our profession of arms. But what is air and space power? In posing this question, we find ourselves more often than not in a situation similar to the tale of the blind man and the elephant. In this story, three blind men attempted to describe an elephant, gathering information by touch. One man feeling the ear, the other the leg, and the third the trunk. Each described the elephant in vastly different terms. Each had knowledge limited to one part out of the many, and thus perceived the whole wrongly. As airmen naturally focused on that part of our Air Force with which we work day to day, we might often view our Air Force from a similar limited perspective and thus perceive air and space power in terms of career fields or functions or tasks. In doing so, like the blind man, we misunderstand the nature of the whole. Our doctrine reminds us that air and space power results from the effective integration of our hardware. All our people, our weapons, our bases, logistics, and all our supporting infrastructure. No single aspect of air and space power should be treated in isolation, since each element is essential and interdependent. To appreciate and understand the air and space profession of arms, airmen, military and civilians of all ranks and responsibilities must recognize the uniqueness of air and space power. Even though our day-to-day experience may not be able to show us every part of this elephant, our doctrine provides us as a means of understanding the whole. This videotape on integrated air and space power begins our look at the Air Force mission and how we control and exploit the third dimension. Through the rest of the series, Air University will explore the various aspects of air and space power to provide airmen a fuller understanding of their profession, our profession, and impart the vision necessary to view the Air Force as a whole. As airmen, we must understand air and space power to work together as a team in carrying out our Air Force mission.
I'm Major Andy Borland, and this presentation looks at integrated air and space power. Seamless air and space power working in unison with the joint team to meet national objectives and shape our national security. The integrated message is one of America's Air Force, operating as an indivisible whole to control and exploit the third dimension. This message was expressed in March 1943 when Major General Carl Spaatz sent a pivotal letter to General Hap Arnold, the commanding general, Army Air Forces. In it, he stressed that the air battle must be won first. Air units must be centralized and cannot be divided into small packets among several armies or corps. General Spaatz was urging the integrated use of air power. U.S. air and space power, as a critical element of joint and coalition forces, attained unprecedented credibility following Desert Storm. First, air and space power performed magnificently as an integrated web of constituent parts working together. Not just great people, not just superb technology, not just improved weapons delivery, not just better airlift, air refueling, intelligence, spacecraft, or any one thing, but better everything. Second, air and space power had come of age in the eyes of the world. Our performance finally matched what today's Air Force and its predecessors had always held as its institutional view. Perhaps the earliest statement of U.S. air power doctrine was the War Department's Field Manual 100-20, Command and Employment of Air Power, released in July of 1943. Its successor, Air Force Manual 1-1, Basic Aerospace Doctrine of the United States Air Force, reflects an enduring institutional view. Air and space power is indivisible. The 5 tasks that FM 100-20 articulated for air power appear just as reasonable today as they did 50 years ago. First, destroy hostile air forces. Second, deny use of hostile bases. Third, operate against hostile land and sea forces. Fourth, wage offensive warfare against hostile nations. And finally, operate as part of joint and combined task forces. We will return to that heritage later. For now, let me relate how these historical taskings not only reflect current Air Force doctrine, but also relate to our mission. First, our Air Force doctrine is coherent, consistent, and concise. It suggests we will perform these historical tasks through 4 basic and complementary roles. Air and space control, controlling the air and space over the combat environment for use by friendly forces while denying its use to an enemy. Force application, bringing combat power to bear directly against surface targets. Force enhancement, increasing the ability of air, space, and surface forces to perform their missions. And force support, sustaining friendly forces. Doctrine represents what we hold to be true about the best way to employ air and space power. Second, our doctrine reinforces our mission to defend the United States through control and exploitation of air and space. As air and space power practitioners, we represent the Air Force to many audiences, either individually or as recognized members of major commands or weapon systems communities. We can send mixed signals to others. Our views are often taken literally and out of context. But we can be part of the solution. The challenge is ours. Our interaction with our sister service warriors is central to inter-service understanding of air and space power and the effective integration of air and space power in joint operations. As blue suitors, what we suggest about these matters has a lasting impact on others. For institutional credibility, we as Air Force members must not divide ourselves or expose a seam for others to split apart. Our senior leadership trusts us to know and understand our Air Force doctrine and to maintain the service's long-standing and consistent institutional view. It isn't any one thing we do that delivers air and space power. It's everything we do. We maintain that integrated air and space power should include all those resources at the Joint Combatant Commander's disposal, without regard to service or national affiliation. Key systems like the Army Tactical Missile System, ATACMS, the Tomahawk Land Attack Missiles, TLAMs, and national overhead platforms should be considered within this framework. To explore these issues, let's review 2 historical examples. In 1967, Israel launched a preemptive strike against Arab forces to begin what has since become known as the Six-Day War. At the end of the 6 days, Israel had won a stunning victory over forces much larger than its own by controlling and exploiting the air. To a great extent, the Israelis' victory was a result of their exemplary use of air power, the way they sought to, and did, control and exploit the air. For the record, Israeli space capability at the time was non-existent. So was that of their adversary. Israel gained air dominance through strategic attack and counter-air operations. Its Air Force destroyed hundreds of Arab aircraft on the ground during concentrated and carefully planned airfield attacks. The air battle was essentially over. From the outset, Israel's clear purpose in air control was exploitation. On the second day of the war, the Israeli Air Force turned its attention back to the Sinai. By exploiting its complete air supremacy, Israel was able to resupply armored brigades critical to success on the ground. The Israeli Air Force even used World War II transports like the venerable C-47. Without control of the air, these old planes would have been easy targets. The Israeli Air Force protected and even escorted surface convoys of road-bound civilian vehicles that were en route to resupply the troops in the field. These efforts enabled the ground forces to advance safely by day and night, while the Israeli Air Force interdicted and destroyed thousands of Egyptian supply vehicles. Debris soon littered the desert floor. Israeli fighters safely flew pass after pass over Egyptian convoys until they were obliterated. But was any single air power contribution clearly the most valuable? Before examining that question, let's examine another more contemporary example. The stunning U.S.-led coalition victory over Iraq in 1991 was reminiscent in many ways of the 1967 Six-Day War. In a spectacular fashion, the coalition's integrated air and space power proved vital to success. We achieved air superiority from the outset, primarily through concentrated and systematic attacks on command and control, integrated air defense systems, and airfields. When the Iraqi fighters got airborne, we shot them down. When they stayed in the bunkers, we destroyed them with precision bombings. Integrated within the air campaign, these complementary missions focused our air and space power effectively and quickly to achieve air superiority. Just as convincingly, in what has been described as the world's first space war, we exploited space to provide force enhancement in ways our adversary could not contest. For almost the entire 42 days of Desert Storm, the coalition enjoyed such complete dominance of the third dimension that coalition aircraft could go wherever they wanted, whenever they wanted, with virtual immunity from interference. Unchallenged control of the air provided security for all military operations, and exploitation of space provided reconnaissance, surveillance, weather, critical communication, and other vital information to coalition forces. Our air and space-based platforms saw and heard practically everything the Iraqis did, while Saddam Hussein's commanders saw and heard practically nothing after the first day. The effect on Iraq was strategic paralysis. The U.S. joint and coalition ground forces were able to accomplish their vital missions almost undeterred. Vehicles, helicopters, and C-130 airlifters moved elements of both the 18th Airborne Corps and the reinforced 7th Corps nearly 150 miles laterally, unobserved and completely unhindered. Once the ground assault began, coalition supply columns snaked nose to tail across endless miles to the rapidly advancing front, supported by unseen but vital space-based systems. All the while, Iraqi columns retreating from Kuwait City were destroyed from the air and ended up as smoking wrecks along mile after mile of the highway of death. One lasting impression of the whole war was General Schwarzkopf's now famous left hook maneuver. That successful envelopment of the Iraqi army depended upon two major miracles. First, the physical ability to move a tremendous amount of materiel that far and that fast. And second, security from enemy observation and intervention. As enabling mechanisms of the joint team, air and space power delivered on both requirements. Intra-theater airlift provided much of the necessary lift, while surface convoys exploited air control to move freely on the relatively few hard surface roads. Complete control of the air and exploitation of space provided the requisite physical security from intervention and observation. The enemy could not counter what he could not see. Both before and after the ground assault began, coalition air and space power sustained virtually unlimited counter-air, interdiction, and close air support sorties, as well as strategic airstrikes that blinded and isolated Iraqi forces. Air Force Special Operations Pavlo helicopters planted radar beacons along the Iraq-Kuwait border for F-111 missions. These Air Force helicopters also serve to support joint missions as pathfinders for U.S. Army AH-64 Apaches, which then destroyed ground-controlled interception radar sites. The destruction of these sites supported air missions in yet another example of joint, integrated air power. The relentless joint and coalition air attacks rendered the Iraqi leadership powerless and dysfunctional. In view of these two accounts, which aspect of air and space operations provided conditions for victory in the Six-Day War and in Desert Storm? Was it the air superiority of air control, the destruction of targets through force application, the increased mission effectiveness provided by airlift, air refueling, spacecraft, or special operations through force enhancement, the base operability or logistics of force support? Clearly, no single part was individually sufficient. Our institutional view reminds us there are no parts of air and space power. The concept is indivisible. Our doctrine says no one aspect of air and space power should be treated in isolation, since each element is essential and interdependent. The future value of air and space power lies in its fullest integration through sustainment, force structure, training, exercises, and employment. Our doctrinal heritage is comprehensive and integrated. It embraces everything air and space power is or does. Early airmen who wrote FM 100-20 recognized that the inherent flexibility of air power is its greatest asset, an attribute which enables air commanders to employ the whole weight of air power as a joint battle winning factor of the first importance. Now we know its inherent speed, range, flexibility, precision, and lethality combine to make it the most versatile component of the nation's military power. We are Air Force people building the world's most respected air and space force, global power and reach for America. As subscribers to our Air Force vision statement, we can help shape our nation's commitment to air and space power. As representatives of our profession of arms, we can contribute significantly to effective joint employment of air and space assets. Our service recognizes the enduring framework that our doctrine provides. Air Force doctrine is our compass bearing, the way forward. We must strive to realize the full promise of seamless air and space power without separate parts or undue emphasis on a favorite role or task. We are the Air Force element of our nation's joint military team. The nation's treasures are too important to squander. In 1943, when FM 100-20 helped us codify the hard lessons learned by U.S. combat forces in North Africa, the indivisibility of air power was a critical concept. It's no less so today. In a totally seamless fashion, the Air Force must prepare to contribute every attribute of its air and space power to any joint or coalition force. As airmen with precious expertise in integrated air and space power, we must help our service and our nation seize every opportunity to reap the fruit of their labor. Now more than ever, we must not be divided by any lesser vision.